This is episode number 182. Today, we're featuring an exclusive segment recorded from last week's Plein Air Live virtual conference, where we had a roundtable titled Art-Life Balance and Women's Issues with artists Jane Hunt, Kathleen Hudson, and Sherrie McGraw, who are the guests on the podcast today.
This is the Plein Air Podcast with Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein Air magazine. In the Plein Air Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called Plein Air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it Plein Air. Others say Plein Air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhoads.
Well, thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome everybody to the Plein Air Podcast. I am on a mega high at the moment. Last week, we did Plein Air Live, and we had a huge audience, much bigger than any of our conventions, and everybody was thrilled with the content. We had people from 30, 40 countries, a lot of people from outside of the U.S. I just want to thank everybody who attended, everybody who participated in our virtual cocktail parties and our virtual painting. We painted icebergs and waterfalls and a lot of cool stuff. And I want to thank the faculty who went out of their way to help us. And of course, thank you to the Streamline team who knocked it out of the park. We learned a lot. We learned a lot of people were attending who were never in a position to attend a plein air convention, so it served a really great purpose. And though a huge number of convention attendees also attended. By the way, the convention, Plein Air Convention, was rescheduled for May of 2021 in Denver. And when we last left Denver before we were canceled or rescheduled, we had over 1,000 people. So in Denver, it's likely to be a massive one. If we're allowed out, everybody's going to want to come. So it's a good idea to sign up now, especially if we're required by then to socially distance. We'll have to limit attendance, and you want to be one of the first ones in so you get to keep your seat. But I don't think we're going to have that problem. I think we're going to be beyond this by then. We've got to have positive thinking right now, right? Anyway, you can register at pleinairconvention.com. I should also mention that as soon as Plein Air Live was going on, after talking to the attendees, we realized they wanted other kinds of content too. So we scrambled and we put together our next virtual summit, Realism Live, which will be a combination of subjects like still life, flower painting, landscapes, portraits, figure painting, drawing, and so much more. And we have a beginner's day as well with basic principles in all those disciplines. And we're just starting to line up the faculty. We have 5 superstars already. It's virtual, it's in your home. And if you can't make the dates, you can watch the replays. But you can learn more about it at realismlive.com. We've already got well over 600 people signed up. A reminder to enter the Plein Air Salon art competition. We are sweetening the pot, adding a little bit more money for it this year. And so you can get your paintings in at pleinairsalon.com. Remember, the deadline is the end of the month, and you might win the cover of Plein Air magazine, might win the $15,000 grand prize. You might win another prize, another cash prize. We got a lot of prizes in there, and they're all cash. Coming up after the session, I'm going to be answering art marketing questions in the Marketing Minute, but let's get right to the roundtable, which I recorded at Plein Air Live, okay? We've got Jane Hunt, Kathleen Hudson, and Sherrie McGraw.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, thank you for being here. We have with us Kathleen Hudson, Sherrie McGraw, and Jane Hunt, and everybody should applaud their presence. So I appreciate you taking the time today. What I wanted to do is to get right into it and talk about the issues that you face as women in the industry, either as hobbyists or professionals, because hobbyists have issues as well. And I can't claim to know those issues, but I know they exist. So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges of being a woman and being a full-time artist? Anybody?
Well, I think that women are not raised to think that they can be successful, or at least certainly in my generation, and me being the elder of the group here. Women were generally raised to have children, and so I will say that is one prejudice that women do grow up with, is that generally men are considered the authorities, and women are not taken, I think, as seriously as men.
And why do you think that is? They're not taken as seriously.
Well, I do think part of it is cultural, that we are, it's what we grow up with. Now, I would imagine Kathleen and Jane probably grew up with something a little bit different maybe. And perhaps I think it's my personal theory that having team sports, that the women doing more team sports is going to make a tremendous difference.
Huh. What about the two of you? What do you think?
Well, I don't want to do team sports, but I like it. I like it theoretically. I think you're probably right, and I grew up with a lot of that too. My biggest challenge has been balancing family and career, and there's still cultural bias against that. So I think we have to work harder as women, and it's not really acceptable in many ways to be considered ambitious or driven. So I think we need to break that stigma. And I was kidding. I do like your idea of team sports. I agree. I just am horrible at sports myself. So
let me explain, because I think that in team sports, you learn to work with other, in this case, other women, to actually, for some goal. And I think men are always doing that. They're always doing team sports, and they're used to helping their friends. And I think, in my generation anyway, there was much more competition, I think, between women.
Kathleen?
Yes, I agree with what was said before, but I would add that with plein air painting, there are just some logistical challenges that I find, from being a woman, that probably wouldn't be something I'd face as a man. So yeah, I just have to think about safety concerns about where I paint and when and who I paint with, and and logistical stuff that I probably wouldn't consider if I were a man. So that's one thing. I've really found that the plein air painting community and the festivals, the galleries who work with this cohort of artists are very receptive to women. At least that's been my personal experience, and I've talked to other women about it too. It's not to say that things are perfect, but I see a lot of representation, and that's not the case in every subcategory of art. So in that sense, I've honestly felt it to be really, really helpful to get out there and meet other artists at these festivals.
I'm curious.
A lot more parity.
I'm curious from Sherrie's perspective, because you've been at this a lot longer than the other two have. You went to art school in, I don't know what year.
Yeah.
But
I have been at this a long time. Yeah, and I started when I was 20.
Do you think that there are more women painting today than there were when you were at art school, or is it that because we seem to see a very high percentage of representation? You go to the plein air convention, it's probably 70 or 80% women.
Mm-hmm. And that always seems to be the case. I mean, certainly when I teach a workshop, and I bet for you guys too, it is a majority of women, and you're lucky to get one or two men.
So why do you think that is? Is it, in other words, are there more people painting today that are women versus maybe when you got into this a few years back?
Yes, I would say so. Yeah, I would say so. And probably, Eric, a lot of what you're doing is probably encouraging a lot of that too. A lot of people who, gave up painting because they raised their children, and they're now able to actually get back to it and start painting.
We have people watching right now who have said that they rediscovered painting and got re-inspired during COVID, when we were putting these samples up and talking to people every day, and that they joined this because they wanted to kind of start up again. And so we heard that from several people.
Wonderful.
But one of the things I'm wondering about is, you know, for anyone, no matter what their gender, it takes a pretty long amount of time to become someone who would be considered a master. Would you agree with that?
Jane?
Yes, no?
Well, Sherrie is a master, so
Yes.
her thoughts on that.
Well, of course she is, and I know she's not going to say that she is, but if we have the number of people who we have, first off, a huge number of women who are entering the market, who are professional artists today, who are appearing at a lot of events. But I don't know how many are considered master level yet. And so is that just a matter of time? Because it seems like I'm going to put my foot in my mouth, but it seems like the perception is that there are more men at master level than there are women. Is that just a matter of them catching up time-wise?
Go ahead, Sherrie.
No, go ahead, Jane.
I would speak to one piece of that, which is because I'm on the board of OPA, I get to see behind the scenes, and we have equal amounts of men and women in the shows. We have equal amounts of men and women that are signature members. But when it comes to masters, we have 8 female masters out of 65, which isn't really acceptable. And the reason for that is, though, that 90% of the applications come from men. So I think some of it is gender bias in as far as what has led up to this point, but women still don't go for the things that they want as aggressively as men do. And so we're trying to undo some of that, some of the stigma, I guess, that's attached to women being, I guess, aggressive or driven or whatever you want to call it. But we just don't see women applying in the same way.
Well, Lynn Boyer and Susie Baker and I went to dinner last night, and Lynn or Susie I think Susie was talking about a study that, and it was not about artists, but it was a study where there was a job, a big step up job, and they found out that a high percentage of women would not apply for that job because they didn't feel 100% ready, whereas men would apply for it even if they knew they weren't 100% ready. So that may have something to do with the applications on OPA. You know, so that maybe there's a difference in how we were raised in terms of taking more risk or something, or maybe it's about women feel like they need to be exactly prepared. Do you have an opinion about that?
Well, I mean, I think all of these are amazing points. And I do think that generally men are raised to think that they can be anything that they want to be.
And you don't think women are?
Well, again, you know, I'm speaking from my generation, but, and I do think it really is changing. I mean, I have a lot of respect for both Jane and Kathleen for raising families and having a career. It's quite an amazing thing. I mean, I knew myself well enough to know that I couldn't do both, and I really made a choice. But it does take a tremendous amount of time. It takes a tremendous amount of time. And I think that the mothers that have done it successfully have figured out how to have the kids in the studio with them, or and make them adapt to their schedule.
I want to talk about that. I think that's a really critical point. Jane and Kathleen, you have a, what, 1-year-old or less than 1-year-old at home?
5-year-old and an 8-month-old.
8-month-old.
Mm-hmm.
And Jane, I don't remember the age of your kids. I think they're growing up now. Is that right?
17 and 19. So one is off
at college. They think they're grown up.
Or not really, whatever is the online version of college now. Yeah. And one's home with us, so yeah.
So what are those issues that you've had to face in terms of that juggle?
Kathleen, you go ahead, because you're in the trenches right now.
Oh yes,
yeah,
yes.
Really
the pandemic has amplified that for sure. The struggles that I face with having young children are are just finding time. I have to carve out time in the studio and try to make that time sacred. Because usually if there's a period of time where my husband has my son and my daughter, who's 8 months old, is taking a nap, then I might have this sense that I should be finishing the dishes or doing something, caretaking, doing laundry. And I have to really make myself, instead of doing those things, sit down at the easel and know that I have an hour or two. So I try to make my painting time sacred, and the other stuff happens, I fit it in, but I really need to carve out that painting time and stick to it. Otherwise it's pretty easy to let it fall by the wayside. So that's the number one thing. The other is to rely on family for support. That's something that my husband and I moved to Lexington, Kentucky, where I grew up, because my extended family lives nearby. So my parents and, aunt, my sister, and plenty of other folks have stepped in and hung out with my kids, just to give me time to go to Plein Air events and to teach workshops. So I've really had a village behind me, and that's something that I would really encourage other young moms who are painting or young dads to search that out, because it's really necessary, and it enriches my kids' lives. We were just talking beforehand about how there's a lot of guilt placed on young moms, especially for leaving home and leaving small children and travel.
Is it self-imposed guilt, or is it guilt that's actually being placed by others?
I think it's both. I think it's for sure both, but a lot of it is social conditioning, because my husband also travels for work, and I don't think he has, I think he misses the kids when he's gone, for sure, but I don't think he feels guilty about going for the purpose of work. Whereas when I was painting I think in 2016, when my son was 1 year old, I did 6 Plein Air events, and a couple of older women in my family circle expressed to my mom some concern about it. They were worried that I was
shirking your
duty.
duty?
They thought I was shirking familial duty here.
But they wouldn't have felt the same way if you were going to a 9-to-5 job there in Lexington or wherever you are. If you were going out for 8 hours a day, they would feel the same way, right? But you're off painting as if that's not work, right?
Yeah, and it didn't matter that I was actually home and physically home for a lot of the other 46 weeks that I've had with my son there, but I think some of it was just this cultural expectation that when you have a 1-year-old, you are with them 24/7. And my kids are actually a great case study now, because my 8-month-old came along in November, and she has been a pandemic baby, in the sense that she does not really go out. I have not traveled since one workshop I taught in March. So we've pretty much just been hanging out at home, and I find it fascinating to compare her personality and her confidence to my son's,
because she's getting more attention and time at home from everybody in the family.
Well, she's getting more attention from me, for sure, than my son. But my son spent lots of time with my parents and with my in-laws, and he had this whole village of different family households that he got to go around and visit.
So she's not getting that interaction.
She's getting none of that, right. And she is extremely fearful in a way that I would not have anticipated. And my son is so well-adjusted and confident, just loves going out and meeting new people, and she's not like that. And so I honestly feel a lot less guilty now about having, given my son to my parents a few weeks out of the year for Plein Air events, now that I see the way she is. You know, we're gonna, after the pandemic is over, I really want to make sure that she gets out there and she, you know, spends time with other people who aren't just me.
You know, I was funny because I went to the grocery store the other day and I had my mask on and there was a man holding a baby. And that baby couldn't have been 3 months old. And I thought, this baby's interaction with life is seeing people wearing masks. I mean, that's becoming that baby's norm. That's, I don't think the baby was wearing a mask. Maybe, yeah, the baby was wearing a mask.
It would be hard to make one.
Yeah. It'd be hard to get him to keep it on.
No kidding.
We talked about the safety issues. Sherrie, I don't know if you go out and paint a lot anymore. Do you pretty much stick to the studio or do you go out and do plein air? I know that the other two do.
You know, I certainly am in the right place to do it, as you know.
Yes.
Right here at the base of the mountain. So it's gorgeous. If when I do paint landscape, then I do go outside to do it, for sure. And I have a gorgeous site just right outside my backyard.
You do. I've been to your place many times. And do you all feel as though when you go out that you want to have somebody with you? Does that matter to you, or are you just going to places you know it's potentially going to be safe?
Well, I would always prefer to have someone with me, but I do a lot of competitions and stuff where I am going by myself, but I generally go somewhere I feel comfortable. I either know or there's at least people coming by. I don't like to go remote places by myself. I run possibly a little more paranoid than the average person. I've been either robbed or mugged or whatever on 4 continents now. So I tend to be a little more wary, and I can't completely focus if I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. So I usually have bear spray or I go with a friend.
And is bear spray for bears or for humans?
Mostly for humans. I have a holster, so it's really obvious. So I'm thinking hopefully it will keep any creepy people away.
Yeah.
So.
You mean this has happened to you? You've been robbed while you were painting?
Never while I was painting, just other times traveling. I used to travel a ton, and yeah, for some reason I must have some kind of target on me because it's happened all over the place. But
well, we had on the forum the other night, we were talking about these kinds of things, and one woman said she was painting towards the back of her car, and her husband was in the car inside the hatchback laying down sleeping. And she was painting, and this creepy guy went by in a truck, put his brakes on, turned around, pulled up behind him and parked. And she was really paranoid. And she woke her husband up, and he got out of the car, and the guy took off running.
Right.
So,
right.
And I was out. I was out painting along the side of a country road in the middle of nowhere, and a truckload of high testosterone boys, probably, they gave me the finger and they swore at me as they drove by, and they called me a particular word. And then I thought, this isn't good. And they got about maybe a quarter mile up the road, and I saw the brake lights go on, and they started to turn around, and I just grabbed my easel and threw everything in the back of the car and took off, and they chased me and followed me. But I thought if I hadn't done that, I probably would have been beaten up, for being a painter. So I'm not so sure it's probably more likely to happen to women than it is to men. But I think it's always a good idea that we paint with other people if we can.
Agreed. Yeah.
And I hear in New Mexico in particular, because there's a fair amount of resentment from the native population, the Spanish, and especially the Spanish, that they resent the gringos coming in and making money off of their land, I think, through painting.
Well, that's another issue for another time, I suppose. So let's talk about, the choice of whether or not one should become a full-time artist. I had at my Fall Color Week a couple years ago, I did some coaching for some people, and I said, look, I'll give you a half an hour of my time and help you out. And 2 different people came up to me, and they both had the same issue. They said, you know, I want to get started. I want to be a professional. I want to make money. And I said, why? And they stopped. And they thought, well, because we thought we're supposed to. And I said, well, you know, do you need the money? In both cases, they said no. I said, what are you really looking for? Are you looking for the recognition, or is it really you want to become? And they both ultimately came to the conclusion, no, it was the recognition they wanted. It was not about making a living. So how do you make those choices? Can you give anybody any advice on that?
Of somebody starting out. Well, you know, I think that to be good at anything, you have to really love it, you know, because you know, everything that you do has difficulties, and certainly becoming a painter, you know, there are going to be rejections. There's going to be paintings that don't turn out. There's, you know, going to be you know, paintings that don't sell, gallery rejections, I mean, show rejection. And I'm just saying that there is that side of it. And so if you don't love it, as I know all of you do, you can't stick with it, you know. So I would say that they need to find what they really love in painting, and that's what they need to be doing. And then you can figure all the other stuff out.
Well, and you've got to love it, because it's a very busy full-time job. I mean, you're constantly working at it.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Right.
Jane, we have seen your career soar. I don't know how long you and I have known each other, but it's been amazing watching how big and important and how recognized you've become in the last few years. Was that just pure determination, or was there more to it?
Well, thank you, first of all. Well, not to throw my kids under the bus, but there was definitely a piece where I took a few years off to raise my kids, and I had to sort of start over again. And I did have a pretty successful career before that point, but when I took 3 years off and came back in, we had a lot of challenges with our youngest, as you know, Eric. That's another podcast we did. But I got into plein air painting because I could do it between hospital visits, and I was on the go all the time. So I sort of shifted, and so it did seem like this massive rise, but actually I was just sort of getting back to where I had been before. But so I guess my advice, I work probably 70 hours a week. I'm kind of a workaholic. And so I agree with Sherrie that you have to absolutely love this more than anything else, I think, if you're going to jump in with both feet and do it professionally. I don't think everyone has to work 70 hours a week. That's just what I choose to do. But it's very difficult to do while raising children. And I admire Kathleen and Brienne and some of my other friends who are currently doing that, because it's not easy. You have to squeeze out, for women especially, you squeeze out every moment when your kids are sleeping or whatever. So I would just say I wish I hadn't completely quit for a few years. If I could have just kept my foot in the door, that would have saved me a lot of time and pain. But
you lose some momentum when you stop. Yeah. I can remember, you know, we have triplets, and you know, Lori, bless her heart, needed breaks once in a while. And of course I worked from home, so that worked out beautifully. But I can remember painting. Our house was the front yard and the backyard. We're in a beautiful area. And I was outside painting with a baby monitor attached to my easel.
Right, right.
So, you know, I'm sure, Kathleen, you're probably going through a little of that right now.
For sure.
I've seen Kathleen paint with a baby strapped to her front, actually. It's pretty impressive.
I'm going to do a demonstration for the Olmsted Plein Air Festival, which went entirely online. And yes, my time slot was when my 8-month-old was supposed to be napping, but naturally she woke up early. So she loves hanging out in this little ergo type carrier while I paint. So there she was. She was trying to pull in my hair.
Well, it's hard to be focused when you're distracted like that, but it's wonderful that you figured out a way to do it. So what do you think the issues that we should be discussing are? Because I have no idea what you folks face. Anybody have a topic you want to bring up?
Jane, I thought you could.
I mean, I think we've talked about quite a few of them. I'd love to encourage women. One thing we're trying to do, especially at OPA, and I'm sure it's the same across the board, is encourage women to go for their dreams and keep applying, because less women apply to all these things, and that's what we're really seeing. There seems to be, I don't know if it's a confidence issue or what it is, or a guilt issue, but we're told to be really humble and play small. And so for those of us who do make it pretty far in our careers, then there's a certain amount of shaming that goes on sometimes from other women that's like, well, you guys must be really ambitious, you must be really driven, and what would be a positive attribute for a man is often an insult to us. And so I'd love to move through the stigma of women promoting themselves or advertising, any of those things that we need to do to stay on top of our career. I think there's a certain amount of shaming that's gone on. So I guess that would be one topic.
What are the things that we as men have perhaps incorrect perceptions on? What would you like to say to me or to those of us who are males? What are the issues that we need to be paying closer attention to and be more sensitive to?
I think, so my experience, like I said earlier, has been great in terms of interacting with other artists in the field, and the men that I've encountered on the Plein Air circuit have been just wonderful in terms of acting as as supports, just as the women do. But what I would say is, on the competition side of painting, when we talk about there being a limited number of awards and of master signature status in different organizations, that sort of thing, I think that there's a fear around bringing more women in, or even talking about that, because we don't like the idea of quotas. No one wants to think that we're just filling up numbers to create some sort of balance, and doing so in a way that might not have to do with where people actually fall in terms of their talent or experience. And I would encourage the conversation to really just shift in an entirely different format. And one thing that I've been thinking about a lot is how there's not, there might be a finite number of awards given at a certain show, but there are not a finite number of great paintings out there that could be created. And when you walk through museums, what do you see on the walls? I mean, it's almost all work created by men up until the last couple of centuries, and even then there's a big gap in the representation. And it's because women were not really allowed, for the most part, to become artists. They weren't instructed. For a lot of that time, women weren't even taught how to read. So I
suspect by the time you're Sherry's age, that will have changed considerably, because
I think so.
Especially in our world. I mean, I haven't seen any of that from my perspective. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I think that women are very embraced in plein air circles, and it's just a matter of, getting a little bit more time to go by, and you're going to start seeing as many women in museums as men. All of you are going to be, in museum shows over time, and certainly once you're gone. And part of the reason is there just simply weren't as many women either recognized or painting. I think there were probably a lot of hobbyists, but we don't hear about many women back in the Impressionist era and so on. I know there were some, but and there's a few that are getting recognition, but there aren't hundreds or dozens. So I think it's going to change. I mean, we're certainly trying on our side. First off, we know that our audience is predominantly women. We're trying to make sure that we're giving the right kinds of exposure, but we don't want to do it in, like you say, in quota fashion. We don't want to put somebody whose work doesn't live up to, they have to have the chops as a painter, don't you think?
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, and what I was hoping to convey was just that art is a conversation. When we walk through museums or walk through galleries, we learn from the work that we see. And so that should be a really encouraging thing. And it's a reason that I value what you all are doing and trying to make instruction available on a really wide scale to people who might not have been able to attend a workshop beforehand. So there's so much value in that. So really, when we boost women or people who in the past would not have had access to art materials and art instruction, we are making the art world better for all of us. We're elevating everyone by making, by boosting women. And I think that in that sense, it's a really beautiful thing. It's a hopeful thing to give a bigger platform to women. And so, yeah, I hope that makes it, I guess, less of a, something that men don't need to fear as painters, it's because it's not really a turf war. It's about bringing everyone to the table and making the conversation better for all of us. And so in that sense, I really like this conversation because it can be something that offers hope and a really beautiful way forward. Yeah. So I hope that resonates.
One of the other issues, just as a general issue, it's not a gender issue. We need to bring more young people in. Kathleen, you're a relatively young woman, a young mother, and if you look at the bubble, there's a big, especially in the plein air world, there's a big bubble on the 50 plus side of things, and it dwindles down to very, very few. Now there are a few very strong young painters coming in, but we need to recruit more people. And why do you think that is? Do you think it's because people have advanced in their careers, they have the time, they have the money, or they're retiring, or is there another issue that's blocking people from coming in?
I think time and awareness are two big factors. When I think about my friends who are juggling 9-to-5 jobs and children and, taking care of a house or a condo, it's a lot to take on. And so if someone's going to maintain a hobby, it probably isn't going to be something that requires as much of you as painting can. Yeah. But my hope would be to get people involved by starting small. I mean, if I hope to, do some really quick instructional videos to post on social media that make it really accessible, whether it's a drawing thing or whether it's just something quick that anyone with some art supplies sitting around could try.
Yeah, we've been doing that every day during COVID, and
it's been great.
1 hour segments, and by day 29 we saw over 1.5 million views, and so
wow.
And that's been bringing a lot of new people in. Well, I've been just given the sign that our time is already up. What I'd like to do is ask each of you to give me a brief pitch so we know what you have to offer, or websites or products. Let's start with you, Kathleen.
Sure. Yes, I do have a DVD through Streamline, and so you can look that one up.
You have another one coming out soon, by the way.
Yes, that is true. So the title is TBD, but it'll be coming out fairly soon. And yes, I love teaching because it reinforces my own love for art. I found that I learn a lot from teaching, and a lot more than I would learn if I just sit at the easel and paint it all day. So that's been a real gift to be able to offer workshops. If you go to my website, which is kathleenbhudson.com, you can see a listing of workshops, and of course some of those, most of them have been canceled thanks to the coronavirus, but we hope to get back on track next year. So I look forward to having anyone watching in one of my workshops.
Well, we have over 1,500 people on this broadcast today, so a lot of people watching. Jane, what about you?
Okay.
Well, first off, thank you, Eric, for doing this. I agree with what Kathleen said. You're doing a real service for people, so thank you. And especially being given an opportunity to talk about women's issues is really meaningful to us. So what I'm doing is I'm teaching online, and my first sessions are all full, but I am taking a wait list right now. You can check out what I'm doing at janehundart.com. And aside from teaching, which I absolutely love to do, I'm doing Door County and Olmsted right now. We have live events for those things too. So anyway, yeah, that's what I'm up to.
And Sherrie, you've got like big things going on around there. Tell us about that.
Well, I do. I want to say, though, it's really an honor to be here with you, Eric, and to have been asked to be here, and also to have met Kathleen this way, and to get to know Jane a little bit better also. And even though Jane's been in my studio, but and I agree completely that teaching is such a fulfilling thing to do, and you do learn so much more by teaching. So I would encourage that is interested in doing that to go that direction too. I have been involved in, we've been doing these online instructional videos as well as e-courses, e-books. And so I love teaching and have taught really pretty much my entire life, pretty much in my entire artistic life. So that's 40 plus years. It's a long time. But anyway, and I really valued my association with you, Eric, and what I learned from you and your generosity, I think, to all of these people. So I know that we all appreciate it.
Do you want to tell them a website or something so they can find your stuff?
Yes. You can find me at brightlightfineart.com.
Is there a hyphen in that?
No, it's just the natural spelling, Bright Light Fine Art.
Okay, terrific. Well, yeah, I'm sorry. It seems like this went by very fast, but
it did.
I appreciate the three of you taking the time and the preparation and everything that went into it. And I hope to see you all live and in person sometime. I hope to see anybody live and in person in the future.
Yeah. Join the club.
We have been, we've been socially distancing in the studio. The crew is wide apart. We're wearing masks when I'm not on camera, and you got to do that. So, well, thanks again, and God bless you all, and I hope you have great success in the coming year.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Well.
All right. Terrific. Bye-bye.
Well, thanks again to Jane Hunt, Kathleen Hudson, and the legend Sherrie McGraw. In hindsight, it's kind of silly having a guy moderate something like this. Next time I'll let them be on their own. I'm sure they would have been a lot more effective without me looking over their shoulder. Anyway, these are important issues and we need to pay attention to them. So thank you for all of your help, everybody. Are you guys ready for some marketing ideas?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
I think I'm going to work on another book here soon. There's so many more subjects I want to talk about, but that's a good one to have, I think, if you want to learn the basics and important things that you need to understand as an art marketer. In the Marketing Minute, I try to answer your art marketing questions from you, our audience. Email them to me, Eric, at artmarketing.com, which, by the way, is also a great website full of resources, artmarketing.com. Here's a question from Carlin Ekman in Minnesota. Carolyn, maybe, asks, what about the affordability of art in this era of COVID-19 and so many people out of work? How do you talk with potential buyers who are struggling financially? That's a great question. The answer is relatively easy. People who do not have money to buy cannot be convinced to buy if they're having financial problems, typically, and you don't really want to take their last dollar or try to twist their arm or do something to get their money if they're struggling. At least I don't want to. So there are other alternatives out there. First thing, it's important to understand that there are plenty of people with plenty of money. always plenty of people with plenty of money, even in a global recession or depression. So I called a boat dealer the other day, just curiously, was looking around at some things, and he told me his inventory was sold out and he had waiting list for boats, all because of stimulus checks. But people are spending, and they're spending on what they want. But we also have heard from a lot of artists who are selling a lot of art right now to people who want to buy. The thing you need to consider is that you always want to stand, as I always say, where is it? In the river where the money is flowing. You see, if your river has dried up, you got to move to a different river. Let me give you an example. Let's say you live in a town where everything is thriving and all of a sudden that town just stops producing. Well, if you are a local artist who lives there and 100% of your income is reliant on the income from that town, you're in trouble if the economy gets bad there. I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and one day they closed down the major manufacturer, which was International Harvester. All of a sudden, everybody was out of work, and it just really killed the economy of the town for 20 years. So you've got to be nimble. You got to be willing to move either yourself or at least get your artwork in galleries and other places, and it's best to have them there before all that happens so you have other sources of income. So stand in the river where the money is flowing and don't stand in a dried up river. So there is money there. Not everybody's struggling, and we often wrongly assume that people don't have money because we don't have it. And it's a common mistake, but there are ample buyers out there. Maybe not as many as before, but maybe just as many. You just never know. You have to find them, and you have to insert yourself with effective marketing. For instance, my magazine, Fine Art Connoisseur, has over 300 billionaire readers. These people may be hurting a little, but they're not hurting a lot. And so there's lots of multimillionaires who love art. You know, some of them are having their business problems. Some of them are not. And, you know, one day it'll all be over. So marketing takes time. You've got to keep yourself visible in front of these people anyway. And so it's a river where money is flowing. But of course, one ad does not solve your problem because they need to know and trust you. That's what we call branding. And so they may not buy from you until they do. Branding is really important. So, you know, it's a process. You got to go through this whole process, but you want to target the river where the money is flowing. The next question comes from Amanda Houston in Cornelius, Oregon. Well, it could have been Amanda Cornelius in Houston, Oregon, but no. Anyway, Amanda says, should I focus on marketing if I'm backlogged in commission work for the next 3 months? All my current marketing efforts are giving me momentum. My phone is ringing daily with new commissions, public art contracts, and more shows. I have 18 commissions in backlog from 2019, and in a strange way, this might be my best year yet. But I'm hearing you loud and clear on visibility and momentum. I cannot rely on last year's success and exposure to carry me to 2021. And yes, my repeat buyers are coming back for more. It's a balance question too. Right now, I need to hire somebody to paint for me, although I never truly will contemplate that. I need to keep marketing. I know how much time and effort it takes. I'm hiring a part-time marketer on my team. I want to up my game. Which road I take is the question. Well, which road, Amanda? That's a tough question. You're assuming that marketing is about selling paintings, and that may not be the case for you. It may be more about commissions or keeping your pipeline full. You know, we all need a pipeline. A pipeline is when you have things for the future. You have to keep people lined up for coming years and use this as a time to raise your prices. If you're sold out for 18 months, chances are you could raise your prices by 10, 20, 30%, and you might not be sold out for 18 months, but you'll make more money on those paintings than you will the paintings that you lost by increasing the price. So keep that in mind. That's something that's really important. The other issue is that you have all your eggs in the commission basket. That makes me uncomfortable. Is that really what you want to be doing? If it all dries up, if all the commission work stops, if you go from 100 miles an hour to zero by the sudden loss of commissions, what are you going to do to survive? You would need to build a new market and build momentum, which takes a few years to do. So why not start gradually doing that now as part of your marketing so not everything is pushing the commission thing, all right? I know that you're talking about hiring a marketer, and I think that's a great thing, but you know, there's a lot of people out there who say they know marketing who don't, and including some major ad agencies, and I've worked with them, and there are people who, you know, they pretend to know it, but they don't really use their brains sometimes. Some of them do. I see so many people hire people who talk a good game, but they don't really know what they're doing. As a matter of fact, I have a friend who did that for their art business, and they got taken advantage of, and they spent a lot of money and they got no results. You know, they'll all talk you. Now the big thing is they all want to talk you into Facebook advertising, and it's a fool's game. I mean, I do Facebook advertising. I'm not saying I don't, but I know how to do it because first off, I have experts who I study under. I'm constantly training myself, and I have found the expert that was recommended to me that actually knows what they're doing. But most of us are throwing our money away in Facebook because you lack the training. So call references first, find out if they help them, if they're doing marketing for some other type of art, and if it does, whether or not it's a conflict. You need to find that stuff out. Marketing a plumber is a lot different than marketing art. You know, if somebody's got a marketing background, doesn't mean they can market art, you know, and some people say, oh, our marketing is marketing. It's not. This is completely different. Most cases, it is marketing is marketing. And there are principles that apply to all things, but marketing art still is different. So keep that in mind because I think that's what you've got to keep in mind, right? It's just the name of the game. I hope you found this helpful.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
A reminder to get your paintings entered to this month's Plein Air Salon art competition before the end of the month. There's some big prize money, $15,000, and a cover of Plein Air magazine at stake, plus lots and lots and lots of other prizes, all cash. And check out the new online summit, too, Realism Live, a conference with a variety of subjects. Go to realismlive.com. I forgot to give you the website for Plein Air Salon. It's pleinairsalon.com. Duh. Anyway, if you've not seen my blog where I talk about life and art and other things, check it out. It's called Sunday Coffee, and you can find it at coffeewitheric.com. This is always fun. We'll do it again sometime like next week. I'll see you then. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein Air magazine. Remember, it's a big world. Go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
This has been the Plein Air Podcast with Plein Air Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.